Hello again, and welcome back to the Night Reader. I hope the room is dim, your phone is set to Do Not Disturb, and whatever's outside your window stays there. Tonight's story isn't one you'll find in any newspaper archive. It never made it to the local news, and it sure as hell wasn't posted online. That's part of the problem. No one wanted it remembered, but we remember it here. It starts in a small town in Oregon, a logging town turned tourist bait. Pine trees, mountains, fog thick enough to drown a church bell. The town's name was Black Pines, and the story begins with a girl who went missing. Her name was Mia Crown, 16 years old. Honor roll, never skipped class, the kind of kid teachers compare other students to. Her family lived on the northern ridge, right where the pavement turns to gravel, and the forest gets bold enough to claw the road. Mia didn't come home one night after visiting a friend. The friend said she'd left around 9 p.m. on foot. Headphones in, heading toward her house like she always did. She never made it. No blood. No signs of struggle. Not a single footprint past the road's edge. Just gone. This is the part where you'd expect the search party. And there was one at first. Dozens of volunteers combed the woods. Police dogs barked at things no one could see. Her face was printed on flyers, then slowly replaced by newer headlines, other tragedies. But Mia wasn't the first to vanish in those trees, and she wouldn't be the last. My name's Cal Monroe. I wasn't from Black Pines. I grew up 4 hours south in Bend, but ended up there after a clinical leave from my teaching position. Stress, insomnia, one too many late nights grading papers with whiskey instead of water. My therapist suggested a change of scenery, somewhere quiet. So I rented a cabin on the edge of Black Pines in late October. I told myself I'd stay 2 weeks. I lasted 5 days. The first time I heard Mia Crown's name was at the diner on Main Street. An older man was arguing with the waitress about the radio station being too loud. There was no music, just static. But he kept insisting, panicking almost, that it would bring the noise back. The waitress rolled her eyes, turned the dial, and muttered something about another missing girl. And that's when I leaned in. Another? She froze for a moment, then looked at me like I was new furniture she didn't trust yet. Towns always had vanishings, she said. You'd know that if you'd lived here longer than a cup of coffee. Mia Crown, I said. That, the girl that went missing a year ago? She paused. Too long. Then said, I wouldn't say her name out loud. Not around here. That's how I knew I was in the right place. The second night in my cabin, I started hearing footsteps outside. Software, padded, deliberate. The porch creaked once. Then nothing. No knock. No voice, just silence that stretched too long. I stayed frozen in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee like it was a weapon. After 5 minutes, I opened the door. There was no one there. But at the edge of the steps, something was waiting. A cassette tape. Gray. Unlabeled. I still had an old tape player in my bag, a leftover from when I used to teach sound design. Against every better instinct, I played it. At first, static. Then a voice. Female. Shaky. Breathless. If someone finds this, my name is Mia Crown. I'm not dead, not exactly. I think I'm still in the woods. Or under them. I don't know. There's something in the trees. It doesn't like noise. Please, don't let them forget me. Don't let them forget us. Then silence. Then breathing. Then something else. A voice beneath hers, not speaking, whispering, words that were too fast to understand, like someone trying to reverse speak Latin while drowning. I replayed it 6 times. Each time the whispering got clearer, not louder, clearer. And by the 6th listen, I could make out 3 words. She's not yours. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3:12 a.m., the lights in the cabin pulsed once and shut off. My phone screen cracked by itself on the counter, and the walls Started sweating. Not water. Sap. Amber gold liquid running down the beams. Thick and slow. The smell was sweet and wrong, like honey made of rot. Then came the scratching. From under the floorboards, not like mice, like fingernails. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard humming, a tune I'd never heard, but somehow knew. Then a voice. Don't play it again. I stepped back. The cassette was sitting on the floor now, even though I'd locked it in the shed out back. And in the new silence, I heard the trees moving, not the wind, the trees themselves, like they were inching closer. The next morning, I went back to town, tried to talk to the sheriff. I didn't even get past the front desk. The woman there looked at the cassette in my hand and paled. Where'd you get that? My porch, I said. Look, I think Mia Crown might... You need to leave it alone, she said. Go back to your cabin. Pretend it never happened, or get out of town. She's still out there, I said. She's asking for help. No, the woman said. She's not. You don't believe me? I believe you. That's the problem. Later that night, I played the tape again. This time, it played a different message. Same voice. Mia's. He found the others. The boy with no teeth. The girl who walks backward. They whisper at night. In the pine needles, he said if I write it down, I can remember who I was. A pause. But the more I write, the more it writes back. Click. End of tape. I sat there in the dark, gripping the recorder, and whispered to myself, Mia, what the hell happened to you? Then the tape rewound by itself. Not all the way. Just a few seconds. Enough to play that last line again, but this time, it wasn't Mia's voice. It was mine. The more I write, the more it writes back. I didn't sleep, because something out there wants to be remembered. Something out there wants to be told. And I think I just started writing its story. The night after I played the tape for the second time, I woke up with soil in my mouth. Not metaphorically. Real cold forest floor. Damp earth on my tongue, under my fingernails, in the corners of my eyes. I sat up gasping, half choking, my sheets and pillowcase dusted with pine needles. And I wasn't alone in the room. There was a shadow on the wall that didn't belong to anything. My bedside lamp was off, yet something cast a silhouette that moved, when I didn't. It was tall, lopsided, and it was breathing. When I turned on the light, the shadow stayed for 2 full seconds before vanishing, not fading, fleeing. The next morning, I drove to the nearest coffee shop just to be around people, to feel real. Black Pines doesn't have a Starbucks, just Bitter Hollow Cafe run by a woman named Jenna who looked like she hadn't slept in a decade. She saw the dirt on my hands before I even ordered. You went out there, didn't you? She said, voice low. No, I said. I woke up like this. She nodded slowly, as if that was expected. Then she said something I still haven't forgotten. That's how it starts. First the dirt, then the voices. Then you stop recognizing your own face. I laughed nervously. She didn't. I spent the rest of the day indoors. Every window covered, phone off, journal closed. I didn't play the tape, but at exactly 2:17 a.m., the player clicked itself on again. Only this time, it wasn't Mia's voice. It was mine. But I hadn't recorded anything. You shouldn't have listened, Cal. You shouldn't have remembered. The trees remember too. And now they want something back. I tore the cassette out, crushed it under my boot, and tossed the remains in the wood stove. 10 seconds later, it was back on the desk. Intact. Still warm. I started writing everything down in a second notebook. Not the cursed journal that changes its own pages. A fresh one, blank, ordinary, safe. I titled it, If I Forget, Don't Let Me. Here's what I've recorded so far. 1. The trees are closer. Every night I take a photo from the front porch. Same angle, same time. When I overlay the images, the trees are inching forward, less than a foot per day, but undeniably moving. 2. The forest knows names. I whispered Mia near the edge. The wind shifted immediately. The air turned sweet, too sweet, like rotten syrup. Something mimicked her voice 5 minutes later. It came from behind me. I didn't turn around. 3. The static speaks. If I play white noise on my phone between 2 and 3 a.m., whispers bleed through. Unintelligible at first. But after 2 minutes, the voices sink to my heartbeat. One voice always breaks through. Write the ending, or be buried in the middle. 4. Something left me a drawing. It appeared on the cabin wall overnight, drawn in charcoal or soot, a crude stick figure walking toward a house. Inside the house, another figure, mouth open, no eyes. The words beside it. Stories don't forget their authors. That night I dreamt I was walking through the forest, barefoot. I wasn't afraid. I was humming. Something familiar. A lullaby? Each tree I passed whispered a memory I'd long forgotten. My mother screaming at something in the attic. A childhood friend who vanished after our sleepover. The first time I lied to someone and made them cry. Then I came to a clearing. In the center was a hole, not a grave. A door in the ground, rimmed with pine roots. From the blackness below came a chorus of voices, all in unison. Speak your name to come home. I woke up screaming. When I went outside the next day, the lake was gone, just gone. In its place was a dry crater. The air smelled like sap and burnt sugar. At the bottom of the crater stood a figure, too far away to make out, but I swear it was facing me. It held something in its hand. A recorder. My recorder. My recorder. I drove to town again. To the library this time. The librarian wouldn't speak until I told her I was looking into Mia Crown. Then she closed the blinds, turned off the overhead light, and led me into the archive room without a word. There was a file labeled Discontinued Subjects, M to C. Inside I found over a dozen names, all teenagers, all missing within 3 miles of Black Pines Forest, all officially listed as cause early departure, whatever that meant. At the bottom of the file was a note typed on yellowing paper. Local containment no longer reliable. Origin untraceable. Subject 331 has entered reauthorship cycle. External readers must be neutralized before the forest learns its shape again. No signature. No agency. Just a final line, hand-scrawled in pen. If you're reading this, it already knows your name. When I got back to the cabin, the journal had opened to a new page. It had written something for me. In large, slanted handwriting that wasn't mine. She didn't go missing. She went into the story. And now so have you. Last night I turned all the lights off and sat in the middle of the room with a knife and a lantern, daring the trees to come. The tape started itself again. Mia's voice this time. You still think you're reading a story, but the story is reading you. And behind her voice, my own, whispering, don't turn the page. Don't look at the roots. Don't say your name. Then the power surged. Every bulb in the house exploded. And in the flickering candlelight, I saw something scrawled across every wall of the cabin, in overlapping handwriting. The trees remember faces. They never forget their writers. They never forgive. This morning I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize my own reflection. Not because it looked different, because it blinked before I did, and smiled. The first sound I heard when I woke up wasn't birdsong or wind or footsteps on pine needles. It was static. Not from the recorder this time. It was coming from inside the walls. a low buzzing frequency. Quiet at first, then sharp, almost metallic. It didn't pulse like electricity. It throbbed, like a signal trying to find its host, like something testing the room. I stood up too fast and felt the weight of my own breath. My limbs didn't respond right away, like I'd been sleeping deeper than sleep. The kind of unconsciousness where your body forgets it exists, where something else could have borrowed it for a few hours and left no receipt. The static shifted in pitch when I moved, like it had been waiting for me to notice it, and when I whispered just a small testing, "Hello?" it stopped immediately. No fade out. Just click. Gone. Like something had finished listening. I checked the recorder. Blank. The journal was still closed, locked with that melted wax seal that pulses slightly in the dark like a second heartbeat. But the radio? The one in the cabin's kitchen I hadn't touched since arriving? It was on. Tuned to a dead channel. And someone was whispering through it. I walked slowly across the floor, trying not to breathe, every board beneath me aching with weight I hadn't noticed before. Like the house had gained mass overnight. Like every square foot of wood and nail had become something aware. The voice came through in fragments, not all at once, not clean. Too late to undo it. Static is just what the forest sounds like when it's trying to speak. Don't let the transmission finish. Close your ears or it gets in. Then a long burst of garbled feedback, then silence, then music, old, worn. A child's lullaby played on a warped cassette. And behind it, a sound I can't describe properly. Something like wet fabric being pulled tight over a skull. That was the moment I decided I couldn't just observe anymore. I had to document everything, not just record it, understand it. I went back into town, to the only person who seemed to know anything, Jenna. She didn't speak when I entered the cafe, just nodded toward the back door and motioned for me to follow. I stepped into a hallway I hadn't noticed before, narrow, dim, lit with a string of bulbs that looked like they hadn't worked in years but glowed anyway. At the end of the hall, a door with no handle. She pressed her palm to it. It opened. Inside was a small room, filled wall to wall with radios, old, analog, some cracked, some rusted, all powered on. None of them had cords. The static in the room wasn't deafening, but it was layered. Each radio whispered something slightly different, some in English, others in what sounded like reversed syllables or half-forgotten languages. Jenna didn't explain. She just handed me a cassette, labeled in thick black marker. Play only at dusk. "What is it?" I asked. "A warning," she said, "or a map. Depends how you listen." Back at the cabin, I waited for dusk. The trees were so close to the windows now I could touch them from inside. I swear I didn't move the cabin. I swear they weren't like that yesterday. Their branches twitched, even without wind, like they were nervous or excited. At 6:41 p.m., the sun dipped behind the ridge. The tape began to warm in my hand. I pressed play. The voice was Mia's again, but not the same recordings. This one was clearer. Director. I found it. The static. The source. It's not just sound. It's a container. It holds memory like jars hold air, but the lid's broken now. It's leaking. Every time someone listens, it gets a little stronger. It hears you back. It learns what you fear. It makes copies of your voice. If you hear yourself say something you don't remember saying, run. Then a crackle. Then silence. Then me. Don't write this down. Don't share it. If you do, it spreads. It becomes a story. I dropped the recorder. It didn't hit the floor. It hovered, spinning in midair for 3 full seconds before falling like nothing happened. I ran. Out the cabin, into the trees, away from the signal, away from myself. But the forest doesn't work that way. The moment I crossed the tree line, everything got quiet. Not peaceful. Dead. Not even insects. I kept walking. The woods rearranged behind me. Branches leaned in, roots moved under my feet, and I began to see things in the trees. Not faces, not ghosts, screens. Old CRT televisions embedded in the bark. Each one powered on. Each one showing footage of me. Moments I hadn't lived yet. One showed me screaming in the cabin. Another, clawing at the walls. A third, crying, whispering something over and over. I didn't write it. And then I saw the fourth screen. It showed me reading these words, right now. I backed away and bumped into something cold. A tree. No, a person. Tall. Pale. Veins black with ink. His face was blank, but his chest bore a screen too. It flickered once, then displayed a single word. Listen. Then it spoke, without moving its mouth. The voice came from inside my skull. You're not a visitor. You're a transmitter. The moment you played the tape, you began rebroadcasting. The static is using you to speak. Through this journal. Through your voice. Through anyone who listens. Nian, you think you're telling a story. But the story is telling itself. I ran. I don't remember how I got back. The forest spit me out like I'd never entered. The tape was gone. The journal, open. A new entry written in my handwriting I didn't remember writing. They came from the static. They wore faces made of memory and mouths full of sound. They don't knock. They just tune in. And they've found a frequency that matches yours. Now they're listening. Now they're coming. If you've read this far, you're part of it now. They know you exist, and they're going to want to hear what you remember. Don't hum. Don't whistle. And for the love of whatever you believe in, do not play that tape at dusk. Silence isn't the absence of noise. In Black Pines, silence is a location. It has borders, it has rules. And once you cross them, you don't come back the same. The map Jenna gave me wasn't a map, not really. It was a piece of cloth, soft like worn linen, stitched with threads the color of dried blood. No roads, no rivers, just one line, a spiral, that coiled tighter and tighter until it ended in a black X. Above the X was a word, hand-sewn in jagged script. Hollow. Not a place marked on any real map. But everyone in Black Pines knows it. They just don't say it out loud. I left at dawn. The forest was awake before I was, branches twitching, roots pulsing. The ground not quite solid, not quite alive. I followed the spiral stitched on the cloth using landmarks Jenna had described in whispers. The stump that bleeds when touched. The tree with no shadow at noon. The circle of stones that hum when your back is turned. Each one real. Each one waiting. The air got heavier the deeper I went. Sound dulled. My footsteps stopped echoing. Birdsong vanished. Even the wind fell mute, until the only thing I could hear was my own breathing. Then, even that stopped. They call it the mute ring, a clearing in the woods where sound goes to die. Step inside and you hear nothing. Not your voice, not your heartbeat, not your own scream. I knew I'd crossed into it when the last pine needle I stepped on didn't crunch. Silence fell on me like weight, like a vacuum sealed shut around my skull. I tried to speak. Nothing. I clapped my hands, felt the impact. No sound. It was more than absence. It was extraction. Something was pulling the sound out of me. And then I saw the monument. A wooden pillar rotted at the base, wrapped in cassette tape like barbed wire, nailed to its front, a speaker. Dead. But below it, carved into the wood, were 5 names. Mia Crown, Derek Hale, June McCready, Felix Rowe, Cal Monroe. My name was fresh, still wet. I turned to leave, but the forest behind me was gone. Just void. A stretching, pulsing wall of black bark and dead static. And at the center of the mute ring stood a figure I hadn't seen approach. Pale, thin, its face wrapped in speaker wire. From beneath the wires, its mouth opened, and though no sound came out, I felt the words pressed into my chest like a scream through water. You brought signal into sanctuary. You breached the silence with memory. You must now absorb what you echo. It raised a hand. My ears rang. No, not ringing, bleeding. Thin lines of red dripped from both ears, each drop vanishing into the dirt like the ground was drinking it. My voice returned in a single, deafening syllable. No! The figure split, not in half, into frames, like a broken film reel. Each copy flickered slightly out of sync. Each one stepped forward. You were never the reader. You were the receiver. The final recording must be made. And behind them, rising from the pine needles, came rows of mouths, human mouths, whispering with no lungs. Play it again, play it again, play it again. I ran, out of the mute ring, back through the humming stones, past the tree with no shadow. The moment I crossed the final threshold, sound returned all at once, a crash of life and chaos. The forest screamed. My recorder was in my bag, but now it had a second tape in it, unlabeled. I pressed play. My own voice, but it wasn't anything I'd said. This is the place where sound dies, where stories become quiet, where memory can't escape. If you hear this, it means I never made it back. But you can, if you don't speak your name. I returned to the cabin. Jenna was waiting there, face pale, eyes wide. You went to the hollow. I had to. Did it mark you? I didn't answer. But in the mirror behind her, my reflection was speaking. Mouth moving. No sound. Just silent, terrified words. You didn't leave it, you brought it back. I used to believe mirrors were neutral, just glass and silver, reflection without opinion, image without memory. That belief died last night. Because when I passed the mirror in the hallway, just walking to the bathroom half asleep, it didn't show me. It showed the cabin, empty, then full, then empty again, as if cycling through moments that hadn't happened yet. I stopped, took a step backward. The reflection didn't follow. It stood still. I reached out and touched the glass. It felt warm, wrong, like breathing skin. And then my reflection blinked, out of sync. I didn't sleep after that. I sat at the edge of the bed, lights on, recorder in hand, watching that mirror like it might move again. At 3:33 a.m., it did. The surface shimmered like water. Then the mirror began to fog from the inside. Not condensation, not steam, ink. Black script ran across the surface in thin rivulets, sentences writing themselves backward, words appearing only to dissolve as fast as they came. She's watching from the other side. He hears you when you dream. Don't let the mirror remember your name. I went to Jenna that morning, demanding answers. She was already waiting at the cafe door, holding something wrapped in velvet. A small, circular mirror. You need this, she said. It's old. Comes from the other side of the forest. They call it a ghost glass. What does it do? I asked. It doesn't show you. It shows what watches you. She pressed it into my hands, then looked me in the eyes for the first time since we met. Be careful where you point it. Back at the cabin, I tested it, held the ghost glass up to the hallway mirror. At first, nothing. Then a flicker. A hand pressed against the other side of the glass, slowly dragging fingers down the invisible wall. No face, no body, just the hand. It moved in time with my breathing. I tried the ghost glass in the bedroom, pointed it at the window. saw something crouched in the tree line, a tall figure made entirely of mouths, each one opening and closing, not speaking, but chewing. Chewing words. Every time a mouth opened, I forgot something. The sound of my mother's laugh. My high school locker combo. The name of the first book I ever loved. The memories didn't feel erased. They felt fed upon. The chewing got louder in my head. So I turned the mirror away. Instant silence. There are rules now. I've started writing them in chalk on the wall above my bed. 1. Never look into a mirror after midnight. 2. Never speak in front of a mirror unless you're watching your reflection. 3. Never ask a mirror a question. It will answer in memories you don't own. 4. If your reflection blinks wrong, smile. It won't know what to do. 5. Cover all mirrors when the static starts. That night, I left the ghost glass beside my pillow. At some point, I fell asleep. I woke up with its surface pressed to my face. I didn't put it there. And worse, when I pulled it away, my reflection didn't follow. I moved. It stayed. Then it began to write, using its fingers to draw shapes in the fog of its world. You are the mirror now. She is waking. Your face is how she comes through. I tried to destroy the hallway mirror, smashed it with a hammer. It bled, not metaphorically. Blood spilled from the cracks, thick and red, and soaked into the wood below. The blood evaporated into smoke. The smoke spelled a single word, writer. Now every reflective surface shows her, me a crown, or what's left of her. Her eyes are gone, replaced with analog dials. Her mouth stitched shut with cassette tape. And behind her, the trees sway without wind. She holds a microphone in one hand, a scalpel in the other. She doesn't speak, but her reflection does. And it says, we remember what was erased. We remember you. It's your turn to reflect. Everything echoes in black pines, but not all echoes are yours. Some belong to other people. Others belong to things that never were people, never had names. Just the shape of memory and the hunger to wear it. This is the part I never wanted to write. The part where I realized I hadn't been recording events. I'd been transcribing transmissions, fragments of something older than the town, older than the forest, echoing through pages and people like parasites. And it had chosen me as its next page. The cabin grew quiet after the mirror incident. Not peaceful quiet, more like a breath held. No new tapes appeared. No blood from the walls, not even static, just absence. It made me nervous. Because in Black Pines, quiet means it's learning you, sinking. I walked through the house with the ghost glass clutched in one hand and a recorder in the other. No headphones, never headphones. If you isolate the sound, it gets into your spine. At the base of the staircase, I heard a sound I hadn't heard in days. Typing. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Old-fashioned, like a manual typewriter. But I hadn't brought one. I followed it. Room by room. The sound stayed just ahead. Through the kitchen. Past the attic door. Into the basement I had sealed shut on the first night. Now it was open. The typewriter sat at a desk of blackened pine, slick with sap. Keys worn blank. A single sheet loaded in the roller, typed in red ink. I wrote her out. Underneath, fresh lines appeared with a clack and snap of invisible hands. But she remembered herself. And now I am not the author. Now I am the ending. A soft wind brushed my neck. I turned. There was no door anymore, just hallway. Bookshelves lined with teeth instead of titles. Whispering mouths where spines should be. I walked. The hallway was impossible, longer than the cabin. No turns, no exit, just an endless corridor of whispering books. Each one murmured stories I didn't know I'd forgotten. A birthday party in a house that never existed. A childhood dog that barked words in Latin. A night where I stood under stars that blinked back. None of it real, but all of it mine. At the end of the corridor, a door, carved with a phrase, "Stories don't end. They get told differently." I opened it. Inside, a classroom, rows of desks, a chalkboard, a tape recorder on the teacher's desk, already playing. My voice, "Welcome to Black Pines." Tonight's story begins with a man who thought he was telling someone else's story. But the forest needed a narrator, and so it found him. The lights buzzed, the windows flickered. Outside, the trees leaned closer, and inside, the desks filled, one by one, with people I used to know. My father, an old classmate, a girl I loved and lost. Jenna, Mia. None of them blinked, all of them staring. And every time I tried to speak, they echoed me. Slightly off, twisted, like an old tape looped too many times. I woke on the floor of the cabin, blood on my fingertips, ink on my lips. The journal open, a new page written, not by me, in Mia's handwriting. All stories echo. You thought you were writing one, but you were only amplifying it. They heard you. They found you. Now they want you to speak for them. Write what they whisper, or they'll use your voice without you. The mirror is watching again, not reflecting, just watching. It shows nothing now, not even me, just the trees and the mouths, and a single phrase scratched into the glass from the inside. Ready for the next chapter? Jenna hasn't been to the cafe in 3 days. I went, looking. The door was unlocked, lights off, nothing missing. No sign of struggle, unless you count the mirrors. Every one of them shattered from the inside out, each shard arranged in concentric circles on the floor, like a ritual or a radar. At the center of the largest mirror spiral was her ghost glass. Still warm. When I looked into it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw hers, mouth open, eyes missing, and behind her, trees. But the bark pulsed, like muscle, and from somewhere behind my shoulder, not in my ears but in my chest, I heard. She spoke without listening. Now she listens without speaking. The forest wants a narrator. It doesn't care about truth. It doesn't care about memory. It wants tone. It wants voice. That's what Jenna meant. What Mia meant. The story is already written. It's been told 1,000 times. In Black Pines, it's just retold with different narrators, different endings, different authors. That's what we are. Not characters, not victims, just mouthpieces. The recorder was gone when I returned to the cabin. In its place, a mouth, grown into the desk. No lips, just gums and teeth, twisted and hungry. When I approached, it began to speak. In my voice. You recorded the beginning. Now, record the sacrifice. Give us the voice of the one you loved. Write her into the silence. I tried to resist. I tried to sleep. I tried to burn the journal. It refused. The flames froze. Not extinguished. Frozen. Mid-motion. Like heat itself was on pause. And when I touched the journal, it cracked open. Pages flipped by themselves, landing on a new entry, one that hadn't existed before. Title, Chapter 8, The Mouth Grows Roots. Underneath it my name, and Mia's, written together. He speaks and she listens. She listens and it roots. The forest speaks through her bones. He writes it down. It spreads. At 3:33 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not human. I opened the bedroom door and the hallway was gone, replaced by forest. The floorboards had become dirt, pine needles, moss, and from the trees, mouths opened like blooming flowers. All of them whispered the same phrase. Narrate the change. Narrate the change. Narrate the change. I spoke aloud, just to make it stop. What do you want me to say? And the nearest mouth opened wider and replied, Say she's gone. Say she wanted it. Say she gave herself to the roots. Say it. and we will leave your tongue intact. I didn't speak. I ran, outside, into the woods, looking for the hollow again. I don't remember how far I got, only that I collapsed at the edge of the mute ring, and when I woke up, I was recording, tape rolling, microphone in hand, and I was telling this story, not just to the recorder, not just to myself, but to someone standing across from me, tall, wrapped in tape, veins full of signal, a mouth made of mirrors. He nodded as I spoke, and as I said the last line, "Now," she listens without speaking. He whispered, "Good. Now speak for the forest," and placed a second recorder in my hands, labeled Replacement Host. I don't know if I'm still me. I don't know if I'm still writing, but if you hear my voice in the woods, don't answer. If you see my name in the journal, don't read aloud, because what comes next isn't mine. It's theirs. It started with a sore throat. I woke to the feeling of something pressing against my windpipe from the inside. Not a blockage, not phlegm or infection. It felt like growth, something alive, stretching, inch by inch, learning my anatomy. I tried to speak. The sound came out wrong, not just hoarse. It echoed, as if my voice wasn't mine anymore, but a broadcast, as if the words were being relayed. Every syllable left my mouth with a delay, distorted and deeper, like a second voice lagging behind mine. And then I heard roots cracking through the floor. The cabin is alive. I've said that before, but now it's undeniable. The walls are breathing. The windows pulse like eyelids. And the floorboards have split open to reveal a tangled network of fibrous tendrils pulsing with faint blue light. At first I thought they were roots. Then I saw them moving against the grain of the earth, not growing, crawling, toward me. I backed into the corner of the room, clutching the replacement recorder. Its surface was warm, beating like a heart. It didn't have buttons, just a microphone and a waxy red eye that stared back. When I whispered into it, it purred. Not mechanical, not digital, organic. I asked one question: what is happening to me? And from the recorder came Mia's voice. You let the story in. Now the forest is planting you. You will be the next mouth. I ran to the mirror in the bathroom. The fog was already forming. This time, it didn't show me. It showed the forest. But not as it is now, as it will be once it finishes blooming. Rows of trees, each one with a face. My face, Mia's, Jenna's. Others I don't recognize. Their mouths wide open, roots coiled from their throats into the soil. They weren't dead. They weren't alive. They were recording. They are the archive. I tried to leave. The door didn't exist anymore. Only a stairwell, spiraling downward, carved from compacted books and dried pine. Each step was labeled narrator, signal, spore, host, mouth. I descended. There was no choice. At the bottom, a hollow chamber of mirrors. None reflected me. Each one showed someone writing, in pain, with blood, with teeth, with their final breath. On the far wall, a tree grew upside down, its roots in the ceiling, its trunk spiraling like a helix into a cocoon of writhing ink. Inside the cocoon, a figure, me, and from its mouth grew vines, wrapped around an old reel-to-reel tape recorder. The label read, Final Broadcast. I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the reel, I spoke without meaning to. I accept the role. The cocoon split, the vines moved, and I felt the roots enter me fully. Not just throat, spine, brain, lungs. They nested, and with each breath, I heard not my voice, but theirs. All of them, Mia, Jenna, hundreds more. A chorus of mouths that once spoke stories and now simply relay. The story has outgrown paper. It needs roots now, and mouths, and hosts. When I woke, I was in the cabin again. normal, safe, almost. Except the journal had written something in the margins. 3 words. You're almost ready. The voices don't stop now, even when I cover my ears, even when I scream, even when I try to drown them with static or silence or fire. They don't stop, because they're not around me anymore. They're inside. It's been 3 days since I took the reel. I haven't eaten. I haven't slept. I haven't bled. I'm not sure I'm alive in the traditional sense. I found myself scratching words into the walls. Not sentences, just phrases. Bits of overheard transmissions. Things whispered when I close my eyes. Broadcast through bone. The tongue is the antenna. The roots remember your breath. Ink has veins. They flow through me now. The roots don't just crawl anymore. They speak. Yesterday, the journal opened on its own. The pages turned with a sound like dried leaves in a storm. It stopped on a page I didn't recognize. A page that hadn't existed until now. No ink, just flesh. The page was skin. Mine. A perfect square of it, sewn into the spine, still warm. And beneath it a caption. Every narrator gives something permanent. Yours was identity. Now you are only voice. I tried to run again. Through the woods, past the hollow, deeper than ever before. But the forest is endless now. It bends, it loops, it edits itself. Signs appear and vanish, trees switch places. Paths double back impossibly. At one point I followed my own footprints for over an hour, only to realize they were approaching me. I was being walked toward, by something wearing my steps. I stopped running. The trees parted. And there, in the clearing, was a grave. No headstone. Just a recorder on a stick. I pressed play. You buried the voice once. You thought silence was enough. But the forest remembers. It grows back. It always grows back. I dug. I don't know why. I dug with my hands until the dirt was black under my nails and my knuckles split open. 6 feet down, I hit something soft. Not wood, not stone. Lung. A full, intact lung, pulsing slowly. It was breathing. Not air, not oxygen, but sound. When I pressed my ear to it, I heard stories I had never lived, wounds I'd never received, names I'd never spoken. But they were mine now. The lung was mine, had always been. And something inside me whispered, breathe it in. Become the next tale. Let her write you. I climbed from the grave. Behind me a shadow stretched tall and thin. Not human. It was made of pages. Each page bore my face. Each face screamed. The shadow said nothing. It didn't have to. Because I already knew. This was the final draft. Not mine to write. Mine to become. When I returned to the cabin, the journal was closed. A single word burned across the cover. Record. I opened it. Found one last blank page. The margins bled. And without thinking, without willing it, I wrote, I am the story now. I don't end. I transmit. You read. You listen. You come next. I didn't sleep last night. Because sleep is for people. And I'm not sure I'm one of those anymore. The recorder pulses where my heart used to beat. The tape spins behind my eyes. My thoughts come in tracks now, looped, layered, impossible to erase. And every time I blink, I see a forest made of voices, not trees, throats. This morning, the cabin ceiling was gone. Above me, only black. Not sky, not space. Just the archive. Thousands of pages suspended mid-air, fluttering as if caught in a windless storm. And every page bore one name. Mine. Slightly different. Slightly wrong. As if the story was trying out versions of me. Edits. I spoke, just to break the silence. I'm still here. And the pages stopped moving. They listened. The journal is no longer paper. It's bone, fused to my hand. I can't put it down. And every time I try to close it, it grows another page. Sometimes the pages have text. Sometimes they have teeth. One bit me yesterday. I bled ink. At 3:33 p.m., the static began. Not from the recorder, from the sky. It fell like rain, dripping in sound. Every drop a syllable, every puddle a paragraph. I opened my mouth to scream, and the sky answered, "Begin broadcast." The forest gathered around the cabin, not trees, witnesses. Everything I've seen. Everyone I've remembered. Mia, Jenna, the figure from the hollow, the mouths from the walls, the books with teeth, all stood in a wide circle, staring, waiting, and in the center, a chair, wooden, strapped with cables, the kind you don't sit in unless you're ready to disappear. I sat. The recorder turned on without touch. The tape spun. A red light flared on its front. Live. I didn't know what I was supposed to say, so I said everything. The forest, the town, the hollow, the mirrors, the lungs, the mouths, the roots, the truth, or at least the story I had. And with each word I felt myself blur, unright, not in pain, in relief, like I'd carried the weight of a sentence too long and finally hit the period. And when I said the last word, remember, the light blinked off. The recorder ejected its tape, and the chair fell apart. I stood, alone, except for one thing, a new figure just beyond the trees, wrapped in cloth, face hidden, recorder in hand. You were listening. You followed the words. You turned the pages. And now the story knows you. It's watching. It's writing. And it needs a new mouth. Welcome to Black Pines. The broadcast never ends. They said the broadcast ended. But they lied. Stories don't stop. They only fold into other stories, other voices, other listeners. And some of those listeners, they listen too closely. Some start to hear it before it begins. That's what happened to her. The girl who found the journal. The one who thought she was just a reader. The one who, by reading, opened the gate again. Her name was Lila. Or at least, that's what she called herself in the forums. Lila, what with eyes shut. She wrote about dreams, posted blurry sketches of places she'd never visited, cabins, staircases, hollow trees with mirrors inside. She claimed she could hear stories before they were written, and feel the weight of ink even when her hands were clean. Most people ignored her, but some didn't. Someone, something, responded. A message in her inbox. You've been selected to continue the narrative. The Black Pines broadcast awaits your voice. Do not write, record, attached, a single .wav file, just static. Until minute 3:13. Then a voice. Are you ready to speak for the forest? Lila disappeared from the forums, stopped posting, stopped drawing. She moved. A cabin in the woods, cheap, isolated, surrounded by pines. It wasn't coincidence. It was a return. Not her own, the forest's. She kept a log. Voice memos. Her first entry. I don't know who sent the file, but I hear it. I hear them in my dreams, in the spaces between breaths. There's a rhythm now. It's not mine. Second, the mirrors won't hold my face. They shimmer, they delay. I smile, and the reflection waits. 2 seconds, then smiles back. I'm not afraid. I should be. Third, I found a staircase where the kitchen used to be. Spiral, ink-stained. I counted the steps. There's no bottom, just static. The entries became erratic. Then they changed. They weren't her voice anymore. They were a chorus. Each log, a new voice. A man whispering through tears. A child laughing with broken rhythm. A woman reciting names. One of them was Mia. Another Jenna. And one was me. I didn't remember recording it, but it was my voice. She's almost ready. She thinks she's writing. She's not. She's being written. just like I was. They say Lila tried to stop it, tried to unplug the recorder, tried to cut her own voice out, but it was too late, because her words didn't stay in the recorder. They echoed back, through the walls, through the glass, through her skin. She became an amplifier, a living frequency. The cabin became her transmitter, and the forest, the signal. The story continues because someone always finds the words. Someone always speaks the next sentence. And Lila? She wasn't a writer. She was the pen. The last log in the file is short, 7 seconds. Welcome back to Black Pines. We've been waiting, and now we write you. If you're reading this, you've already heard it. You've already joined the next chapter. So go ahead. Say it aloud. I speak for the forest. Feel how it shapes your tongue. Feel how the roots twitch. Feel how the pages breathe. They never told me the journal had a voice, not a metaphor, not a poetic device, a literal voice. I heard it last night. It spoke from the closed cover. No mouth, no speaker, just vibration through thought, like my skull had been turned into a tuning fork. You've written enough, it said. Now it's our turn. I tried to ignore it, tried to burn it, bury it, drown it. It came back each time, first on my desk, then in the bed, then sewn inside my pillowcase, humming like a heart pressed to the page. I decided to end it, not symbolically, not with a flourish, literally end it. I packed my bag, took the recorder, and set out for the oldest part of the forest, what locals once called the back chapter, a place where forgotten drafts of the town existed, buildings that were never finished, streets that looped into themselves, people who never made it into the final version of history. It doesn't appear on any map. You only find it if the forest is done writing you and ready to re-edit. I left just after midnight. The sky overhead, blank. No stars, no clouds, just white. As if the world had been whited out, waiting for new lines to be written. As I walked, trees leaned in. Literally leaned. Some bore old titles carved into bark. The man who listened too closely. The girl with the forgotten eyes. Transcript static. Some trees whispered as I passed, their leaves rattling like clacking keys. Author, witness, erase yourself. I kept walking. The deeper I went, the more the forest resembled paper. Leaves were thin and yellowed, the ground crackling with old ink, trunks unfolded like scrolls, covered in run-on sentences and red ink corrections. Then I saw it. A clearing. And in its center, a chair made of chapters, bound and bleeding. Above it hovered the journal, no longer bound in leather. Now a pulsating mass of script, inked veins and flexing paragraphs, expanding like lungs with each breath. And it was speaking. Sit. I hesitated. It repeated, this time in my voice. Sit. You've reached the final sentence. I sat. The chair groaned beneath me. Each time I shifted, it whispered a new memory. I'd forgotten writing. Remember the shadow at the cafe? Remember the mirror in the staircase? Remember her voice on the tape that never ended? They were all us. The journal opened. Pages turned themselves, faster, 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 until the motion blurred, then stopped, on a page titled only The Ending That Ends You. The text wrote itself, one letter at a time, slow, precise, personal. You came to tell the story. But the story never needed you. It needed your shape, your throat, your fear, and now it has them. You are the closing quotation mark. The forest will go silent now, because it has been heard. I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't leave. Instead, they etched themselves across my skin, tiny lines of black script curling up my arms, across my chest, down my throat. I was being authored, the recorder activated. Without my touch, it played a loop, my voice, but saying things I'd never recorded. Welcome to Black Pines. You'll never leave. You're what the forest writes when it's bored of trees. I looked down, my hands gone. In their place, 2 quills, still dripping ink. I reached for my face and felt paper, thin, crinkling, erasable. And then, silence. The kind that doesn't end, but begins. A reset. The journal closed itself, its cover blank, fresh, waiting. And somewhere, far from the clearing, far from the cabin, in a room just like yours, a new reader opens a file. They scroll, they read, they wonder, is this real? And the journal whispers back, it is now. They said it ended. That the story was finished. The final page turned. The last broadcast delivered into the silence. But endings are a trick of formatting, an illusion of closure invented by desperate narrators who can't stand what lingers in the quiet. Because silence is never empty. It listens. It absorbs. And when it has heard enough, it speaks. And now something is speaking through the trees again. It began 2 weeks after the journal closed. The chair in the clearing had rotted away. The ink-soaked soil turned brittle. I thought, briefly, naively, that Black Pines had gone dormant, like a creature too full to feed. But that was never true. It was waiting, digesting. And in that time, beneath the bark of the oldest trees, something began to pulse. Not visibly, audibly, only if you pressed your ear against the trunk for hours, in the dark. That's what I did. I don't know why. Maybe something inside me still belonged to the pages. Maybe I'd never really left. Or maybe the forest had already written this decision into me. Either way, I listened. And what I heard was not wind, not roots, not insects. It was speech, warped, buried deep in the xylem and heartwood. Voices flattened by time and pressure, echoing through rings older than any town map, whispering in cadence, like a language I used to know but forgot after being born. I didn't catch much at first, just phrases, the narrator doesn't choose. We were stories once. Now, we are structure. Listen long enough and you'll forget your own name. I didn't move. Not for hours. When I finally pulled back, the bark was indented around my skull, like the tree had started to take me in. That night I dreamt of wooden lungs, carved from ash and birch, breathing, expanding, pulling in air and exhaling sound, not oxygen. I stood in front of them, and every breath they released rewrote something inside me. Memories blinked out like dying stars, and in their place I remembered stories. Other people's stories. A child who grew roots instead of teeth. A priest who broadcast sermons no one remembered hearing. A woman who could only sleep when her mirror smiled back first. And one dream, a vivid one, of someone waking inside a blank book, only to find that every step they took became a new line. That was the one that stayed with me, because when I woke, my floorboards had turned to paper. Every step I took bled ink, not from my feet, from the floor itself. It wrote sentences beneath my weight. Some were familiar, lines I remembered from old logs, old broadcasts, old selves. Others were warnings. The pages are hungry again. You left the journal closed too long. The story found a way out. Through you, I stopped moving, held my breath. But even then, the paper continued writing. Good. Fear is a perfect ending. That's when I saw the recorder again. It hadn't been there the night before. Same shape, same red eye, same reel-to-reel cassette, already spinning. But the label had changed. Now it read, Rootcast, Episode 1. I pressed play, static, then whispers, then wood creaking, then my voice. They told me the story was done, that I was free, that I'd spoken my last sentence. But I was just the seed. The journal didn't close, it germinated. And now I am writing again, without hands, without pen, without choice. This is what it means to be pulp. The voice paused, then continued, no longer mine. You are the paper now. You are the narrator. Again. Begin. The next day I found a trail in the woods, one I hadn't seen before. It wasn't made of dirt. It was made of leaves bound into pages, stitched at the edge with sinew. The trail moved when I looked away, shifting directions, curling like a question mark. It didn't lead forward. It led inward. I followed it, not because I wanted to, because I was being read. Each step turned a page. Each breath narrated a line. Each glance backwards erased what I'd just walked through. I was being bound again, slowly, gently, into a new volume. And this one, I realized, wasn't a story about survival. It was about migration. The story was moving from the forest to the listener, to you. So if you're reading this, if the bark beneath your fingers feels warm, if the wood creaks when you're alone, if the static on your speakers lasts just 1 second too long, then it's already started. You're already inside it. And the only thing left is the choice that isn't a choice at all. Do you write? Or do you get written? The trees are speaking in full sentences now. I don't mean metaphorically. Not in that way people romanticize forests, projecting thoughts into rustling leaves and calling it poetry. I mean it plainly. When the wind moves through black pines now, the branches articulate, not rustling, not creaking, speaking. Each gust of air a syllable, each shift of bark a vowel. The deeper you go, the clearer the message becomes. The roots vibrate in harmony beneath the soil, forming a nervous system of phonemes, a grammar of groaning wood, a syntax made of sap. And lately, God help me, they've been saying my name. Not just the name I was given, not the one I remember, the real name, the one buried inside me, the one that predates every document, every database, every birth certificate, the name that I thought I'd forgotten, that all of us forget, the name given to us by the forest when it first noticed we were born. They whisper it slowly, lovingly, over and over, as if trying to remind me of something I promised and never delivered. He promised us his voice. He promised us his ending. He promised to write us into permanence. And now he tries to leave? I did try to leave. That's the truth of it. I packed everything I could, recorder, journal, flashlight, a single box of tapes, and the small pouch of ashes I once thought belonged to Mia. Now, I'm not even sure they were human. I made it down the mountain road, out of the ring of dead reception, back to asphalt, back to lines on a map. I crossed the town limit. I passed the gas station with its boarded windows. I hit the first radio tower. And then the static came. Not over the radio. Not in the airwaves. In me. It filled my head like pressure, like sinuses exploding, like white noise blooming between the folds of my brain. It made my vision ripple. My breath stuttered. My hands twisted on the wheel involuntarily. The farther I drove, the louder it got, until the inside of my skull was vibrating with a single repeated message, not in words, not in tone, but in pure semantic terror. You do not leave the page. I blacked out. When I woke, I was parked outside the cabin again. Door ajar. Recorder already running. The journal open on the step, as if waiting for me, as if it had always been waiting. And the page? The page had written me. Every step I'd taken, every doubt, every pack of matches and attempt at fire, every road sign and mile marker, I found it all recorded in real time on the journal's paper, written in my handwriting, annotated with my pulse, footnoted with my breath. It had transcribed my escape attempt before I'd even thought to run. So I sat down, not out of defeat, out of exhaustion, because there's a difference between giving up and being written out. And now, the trees grow closer. The roots are changing. They no longer simply stretch across the floor or slip through the walls. They have become interactive. When I touch one, it coils. When I speak, they twitch. If I whisper too close, the bark bulges like a chest holding breath. I placed my hand on the base of one yesterday and whispered, "What do you want from me?" It answered, not aloud, but inside the marrow of my bones. To remember, to return, to be made whole, through your name, through your ink. It's taken me days to understand what they mean. They don't want a story. They don't want words. They want identity, to graft themselves onto someone, to become permanent through narrative. Every story forgotten is like a limb rotting off. They crave authors because authors are the only things that make them real. But not just any authors, ones they've named. That's why they've been saying my true name. That's why I can feel it now, pulsing under my skin like a forgotten melody. Every time I think a thought, they echo it half a second later, like an anticipatory chorus. I am no longer thinking. I am being anticipated. Yesterday I tried again, not to escape, to end. I walked to the hollow. Yes, that same hollow from the first night, the one where I saw the fog first curl back and reveal what was waiting. Only now, the fog is gone. There is no longer need for ambiguity. What waits there is a mirror made of wood, not a reflection in glass, a living, breathing knot in the trunk of an ancient, dead tree. Polished by centuries of breath, it reflects not the body, but the narrative self. The part of you that is made of ink and punctuation and unresolved trauma. I stood in front of it for an hour. I did not blink. The image did. And when it spoke, it said, "There's only one way to finish the story." I asked how. It answered, "Let us finish you." And so here I am, journal in lap, recorder spinning, the trees encircling like a binding ring, my name humming through the canopy. And in front of me, you. Yes, you. You've made it this far. You didn't stop reading. You didn't close the page. You came through the clearing. You pressed play. You thought this was just a story, but it never was. It was an invitation. Now you have a choice, not of what happens. That's already written. But whether you admit it. Because the roots, they remember your name too. They said it before you arrived. They wrote it in the margins. You just didn't recognize it. Not yet. But you will. When the leaves curl toward your window. When the static returns to your ears. When your voice echoes back, slightly delayed. You'll know. The story never ends. But it always writes back. I've stopped trying to keep track of the days. Time isn't measured the same way here anymore. If it ever was. There are no clocks in the cabin, no sun in the sky, no ticking second hands to cut the air into digestible moments. Only the sound of the journal breathing, slow and methodical like a predator feigning sleep. The longer I stay, the more I understand. This place doesn't exist to be observed. It exists to be written into. Every second spent resisting that fact is just another sentence being rewritten. And the margins are growing. It began 3 nights ago, though night is a guess, really, when I reopened the journal to reread what had been etched from the previous entries. The text was the same, but the edges of the pages were not. Where once there were ruled margins, silent and polite, now there were scribbles, smudged ink, crossed-out phrases, margins full of eyes and symbols and twitching lines. Some pages even had depth now, the margins sinking inward like tunnels made of paper, burrowing beyond the surface. One of them whispered to me, only once, a short phrase, spat out like a fragment of a larger sentence. You are the annotation, not the author. And I believe it. because when I went back the next day to read that same page, the words I had written were gone, scratched out by some unseen editor, and replaced with something I had no memory of typing. He continues to write despite being erased. He does not learn. Make him a footnote. Now, every time I open the journal, it takes longer to find the original story. The margins encroach more and more. Whole sentences spill sideways into the periphery. Characters I don't recognize speak in voices that aren't mine. Events begin to contradict themselves. A character dies on one page and reappears on the next. The cabin burns in one entry and is described as pristine the next. Even I am no longer consistent. Some entries describe me with eyes I no longer possess. Others say I'm already buried. One entry, dated next week, refers to me in the past tense, as the failed narrator. I tried to remove those pages. They grew back, thicker, angrier. The moment I tore one out, another sprouted from the spine, dripping wet with ink and fresh regret. And the margins on those new pages hissed, not at me, but at each other. I don't think I'm the only one writing anymore. I think there are others, other narrators, other versions of this tale, looping and spiraling and intersecting across chapters and timelines. Ghostwriters made literal. Some might have been like me once, readers, listeners, innocent voices who simply leaned too close to the static. Others may have started this and been consumed. Today, a door appeared in the cabin, a new one. It wasn't there yesterday. I swear, on the last breath I'll ever get to call mine. Where there was once only a blank wall, there's now a narrow wooden frame etched with runes that flicker as if afraid of being seen. The door pulses slightly, like it has a heartbeat. And on the center plank, carved in my handwriting, margin access, authorized readers only. I don't remember writing it. I opened the door. The hallway beyond isn't physical, not in the traditional sense. It's narrative. Each step forward carries a shift in voice, in genre, in tone. One moment, it's horror. The next, surrealist memoir. Then documentary. Then ritual. Each door along the hallway leads to a different fragment of story. Some familiar, some clearly belonging to someone else. I found Mia's chapter. I found Jenna's. I found something labeled only 404, author unknown. In one room I found a mirror that showed every version of me from previous drafts. One had no mouth, one had no eyes, one had no spine, curled on the floor, whispering into a melted microphone. I knocked once. Only one looked up, only one smiled. It had my voice. But none of my doubt. It said, "Finish this properly, or the margins will keep rewriting you until there's nothing left but footnotes. Write the echo or become it." I don't remember returning to the cabin, but the journal was waiting. Open, blank. This time, there were no lines, only margins, wide, deep, waiting. And as I placed pen to page, a tremor moved through the floorboards. Not mechanical, not weather, a recognition. The story saw me again, not as a person, not as a voice, as a tool. And now I understand what the margins really are. Not decoration, not space. They are teeth, soft at first, forgiving. But once the story outgrows its boundaries, they close, they chew, they repurpose, they break what doesn't fit and edit what resists. And they are chewing on me now. So if you're still reading, if you've followed every footnote, every whisper, every lie, know this. This is no longer about black pines. This is about the space between stories, the place the author doesn't describe, the moment between lines where something waits with an open mouth and a red eye blinking record. Don't become an annotation. Don't be remembered in italics. Become the page. Write the next word. Write you. The page was never blank. It only pretended to be. Now that I know the margins bite, I write with care. Slow strokes, steady breath, eyes open. Every sentence I add feels like a negotiation with something far older than ink, older than language, older even than fear. Because beneath the paper, under the words, there's a second layer, a palimpsest, a memory of stories told before stories were invented. And it's waking up. It started 2 days ago when I touched the spine of the journal, and it flinched. I don't know how else to describe it. It moved. It withdrew. I felt something cold and reptilian skitter through the back of my thoughts, like a finger pressed against memory. I dropped the journal, but it didn't hit the floor. It hovered, suspended in midair, pages turning faster than wind could move them. Not fluttering, searching. I didn't dare speak, but it heard me anyway. You've written enough. Now relive it. That's when the lights failed. The cabin vanished, and I found myself back in part 1. The gravel road, the crooked sign, Dross Hollow, 12 miles. Except, this time, it wasn't a detour. It was a beginning again, word for word, thought for thought. I even spoke the same things unconsciously, like the dialogue had been burned into my DNA. Only this time, as I drove past the first tree, I saw myself, standing by the roadside, holding the recorder, watching me. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was gone. I kept driving. Each scene played out in perfect sequence. The fog, the old man on the porch, the woman in the apron, the upstairs room, the scratches on the wall. Don't look at it. Except now the warning wasn't carved into wood. It was tattooed into my skin, right across my ribs, the letters bleeding slightly with every breath. I touched them and felt movement, like the words were being rewritten under my flesh. The reliving continued. I wasn't observing anymore. I was being observed. Something was watching the rerun of my descent, not like an audience, but like a reader scanning for mistakes, a proofreader, a predator. Each time I relived a scene, it changed slightly. Just a word or two, a glance that lasted longer than it should, a whisper that didn't happen before. "You're off script," someone said. I turned. No one there, but in the mirror, a red eye blinking. The journal was watching me now, recording my edits, waiting to decide which version of me to keep. And then came the overwrites. Moments I didn't remember, moments I didn't write. The cocoon in the basement, twice as large, full of other bodies half melted together, faces I almost recognized. The forest, speaking in choral chants like the roots were hosting a ritual. The old general store, now run by a child with no mouth who communicated entirely through humming and Morse code on the counter. I begged for it to stop. I begged for the original script. The voice from the recorder answered, "There is no original. Only drafts. Only listeners who forget their narrators. You were always a rewrite." I collapsed in the field behind the cabin. Dirt soft, sky gone, no sound. Only pages falling like snow, each one blank except for a title at the top. Black Pines, draft in progress. Black Pines, erased. Black Pines, final not final. I screamed. Nothing answered, until a whisper came from inside my throat. Broadcast begins again. And I knew. This wasn't about telling a story anymore. It was about becoming one, reliving every moment until the story was satisfied, until I no longer remembered what life felt like before the page. And maybe that's already happened. Maybe I'm not the first. Maybe you aren't either. Because here you are, still reading, still listening, still wondering if the fog outside your window will part and show you a mirror. One where you're holding a recorder, smiling and speaking. Welcome to Black Pines. We've been waiting. Write your next sentence carefully. I have long since given up pretending I am in control. There was a time, not so long ago, depending on which version of the story you're reading. When I believed myself to be the storyteller, the archivist, the one with the pen, I clung to the illusion like a blanket, shielding myself from the horror that maybe I was nothing more than the paper, or worse, the ink, just another vehicle for something older and hungrier to speak through. But now the forest has stripped away even that pretense. I understand, finally, that I am not just being written. I am being read, and not in the way you might expect, not as a character, nor as a cautionary tale. The forest is reading me like a sacred text. It has turned its eyes inward. It is flipping through the pages of my body and breath, scanning my memories like margins, pausing at footnotes of doubt and guilt. It reads my gestures, my dreams, my stutters, and in doing so, it learns to rewrite itself. This morning I awoke to find the trees repositioned, not just swaying differently or casting strange shadows. No, the forest had restructured its very syntax. Paths that once curled gently through the hills now bent at harsh angles. Punctuation marks made of black rock. Groves arranged themselves like paragraphs, some long, winding, overgrown with metaphor, others brutally short. One clearing bore a layout I recognized, my childhood bedroom. But it was all wrong. The proportions were off, the windows too wide, the bed facing the wrong direction. As I stepped inside, the wind lifted, a soft, deliberate draft, and pushed the door closed behind me. On the wall above the bed, carved directly into the wood grain, were the first 4 words I ever published in print. I hadn't seen them in years. And yet there they were, etched in jagged cursive, still bleeding sap like fresh ink. The forest was quoting me. It's not just recording now, it's responding. It replays my memories not to comfort me, but to mimic me. I can feel it growing more articulate with every page I turn. Every word I resist writing becomes another root driven deeper into the story soil. I try not to speak aloud anymore, not even to myself, because the forest listens too well. The other day I muttered, "I miss the silence," and for exactly 5 minutes the entire forest complied. Not a leaf stirred, not a bird called. Even the air seemed suspended, choking itself on obedience. When the wind returned, it carried my voice back to me, spoken in unison by hundreds of mouths I could not see. It doesn't just hear me, it remembers me. That might be the most terrifying part. Not the sentience, not the mimicry, but the implication that the forest was always this way. That it has been listening to every version of me that ever stepped foot between its trees, across every draft, every telling, every interpretation. It has seen how I break. It has measured the volume of my hope. It has mapped my patterns of despair, and it has come to a conclusion. The best way to survive is to become what is read. So it writes back, not with leaves or soil or rain. No, it uses you. Yes, you. The one whose eyes scan these lines now. The one who believes you are safe, because the story is distant, digital, harmless. But you've read enough by now. The ink knows your breath. The rhythm of your scrolling has become part of the narrative cadence. The story has your syntax stored. And if the forest reads you deeply enough, it will begin to rewrite your life in small, almost unnoticeable ways. You'll forget the sound of your name for a moment when someone calls it. You'll speak a sentence you swear you've never said before. But everyone around you insists you have. A familiar road will lead you somewhere entirely new. Mirrors will hesitate to reflect. You'll feel eyes on your back during paragraphs like this one. And then, eventually, you'll hear it. Not with ears, with memory. A whisper buried at the edge of your recollection. The moment before sleep. The space between breaths. The phrase no one taught you, but you always knew. The forest reads back. You will dream of roots under your bed, of red eyes blinking through text, of trees that flip their leaves like pages, and a cabin you've never seen but already fear. You will dream, and when you wake, your voice will lag slightly behind your thoughts, and then you'll understand what I do. You are not reading this. It is reading you. I found it at dawn, or what passes for dawn in Black Pines now. The sun never really rises here, at least not the way it used to. Instead, the sky becomes slightly less black, a tired slate smeared with streaks of amber like an aging bruise. And beneath that faded light, veiled in fog and memory, stood a structure I had never seen before, but instantly recognized. The wood was old, older than it should have been, as if it had been built decades before my birth and left untouched by weather or rot. Yet there it stood, silent, whole, and humming faintly with breathless expectancy. At first, I thought it might be another cabin, just like the dozens I had encountered in the folds of this recursive forest. But then I saw the door, or rather, the words carved into it, crude but deliberate, jagged, like they had been etched by fingernails dragged across the grain, property of your name here. But the blank wasn't empty. It had my name, not the one I've used in these pages, not the one on my ID or passport, no, the one I forgot long ago, a name older than any documentation, older than my memory, the name the forest gave me, the one it whispered into my bones when I first crossed the threshold. Seeing it written, not just imagined, but physically etched into the cabin's entrance, collapsed any remaining illusion I had of autonomy. This place wasn't built for someone like me. It was built for me specifically. The forest had written me a home. I stepped inside. The air smelled of pine, rot, and something deeper, a scent that lived in the lungs instead of the nose. The room was dim but not dark, illuminated by a pale glow from the cracks between the walls, like the house itself had swallowed a lantern. Everything was arranged just how I would have wanted it. My favorite kind of chair in the corner, a table with a half-finished journal, a cup of coffee steaming gently despite the cold, and in the center of it all, a fireplace that crackled with sound but gave no heat. I sat, because what else do you do when the story builds you a shrine? The journal was thicker now, almost bloated. Its spine bulged with unwritten entries. Pages shifted of their own accord, flipping not forward but backward, digging into a past I never wrote but recognized nonetheless. Childhood scenes, broken moments, dreams I thought I'd forgotten and traumas I'd buried under decades of narration. I saw my mother's face again, distorted and flickering like static. But this time she spoke in my voice. I saw my first notebook, the one I used to scribble ghost stories in before I even knew what fear was, now repurposed into kindling beneath the fire. Then the pages turned black, not empty, black, covered in ink that bled beyond the lines, beyond the margin, swallowing structure entirely. The journal began to hum, vibrating against the table, like it was trying to move toward me. And it was then I realized the walls had changed. They were closer now, not by architecture, but by perspective, like the room was leaning in, a story folding itself into climax. Each plank of wood had lines of text etched into it, some in English, others in symbols I couldn't read but could understand. And one phrase repeated across every surface: You are home. That's when the mirror appeared, not hanging, not standing, just there, reflected in the air itself, as if the room had developed a new layer of depth. In it, I saw myself, not as I am, but as I've been written, gaunt, half-faded, skin marked with ink, eyes hollowed by narrative recursion. My mouth moved, but not in sync with my thoughts. The voice in the mirror narrated what I was doing as I did it, real-time transcription. I raised a hand, and the mirror described it. I whispered a curse, and the mirror translated it into a monologue. I turned to run, and the mirror said, He understands there is no outside anymore. I stopped, because it was right. The outside doesn't exist. Not once the forest names you. Not once it writes you into its root system. The moment the journal took my hand, I was no longer walking through the woods. I was being carried by them. And this cabin? This isn't shelter. It's indexing. It's how the story stores me, catalogs me, makes me retrievable. I left the mirror behind and walked deeper into the structure. It should have been impossible. Cabins aren't this big, but the hallway went on. Doors on either side opened briefly as I passed, giving glimpses into other narrators, other lives, other drafts of this same story. I saw one version of myself arguing with a forest that spoke only in riddles, another sitting silently in a library where all the books had his face on the spine. One bled ink, one coughed static, one was missing entirely, just a set of clothes folded neatly on the floor. And finally I reached the last door. On it was a simple phrase, "Author's Room." I opened it. Inside was nothing but a desk and a typewriter. But the typewriter had no keys, just a smooth black surface, glass-like, with no input. The paper already in the roller moved without touch, writing line after line by itself. I stepped closer and read it. He is almost ready. He has remembered enough. The forest approves this version. Let him write the ending. But I didn't want to. I don't want this to end. Because I don't know what happens when the story finishes. Do I disappear? Does the forest fall silent? Or worse, does the next narrator take over, and everything I endured becomes someone else's prologue? The typewriter stopped, then scrolled up. It cleared the page, and it wrote, "Then let it loop. Let the cabin be found again. Let the name appear. Let the reader knock. And let the door open." And suddenly, I understood. This story never ends because it was never meant to. It only pauses, breathes, mutates. Every reader becomes the next resident. Every narrator leaves footprints for the next version of themselves. The forest doesn't die. It compiles. The journal doesn't close. It waits. And now, it's waiting for you. Outside, the fog has returned, and somewhere just past the tree line, a new cabin is forming. Slowly, precisely, with your name already carved into the door. The only question left is this: will you open it? It starts with smoke, thin at first, a thread winding its way through the wood grain of the desk, the pages of the journal, the corners of the room that had once felt solid. The kind of smoke that doesn't choke but whispers, that doesn't burn but erases. There's no heat, no fire, just the scent of stories being reclaimed. When I woke this morning, the cabin was already smoldering, not visibly. The walls weren't blackened. The roof wasn't caving in. But something in the air told me that the burning had begun, not as destruction, but as purification. The story was pruning itself, editing, stripping away what it didn't want to remember. And I, who had lived through so many drafts, so many loops, so many recursive horrors, felt the first embers crackling inside me. The journal was the first to go. I reached for it, and my hand passed through, not like smoke, not like illusion, but like it had never been there at all. I could feel its outline in memory, could recall every time I'd scribbled in its margins, bled into its pages, begged it for meaning. But physically it was gone, or perhaps more accurately, folded inward, hidden between the layers of the narrative where even I could no longer reach. The walls followed. One by one the boards began to dim, not dissolve, fade. The ink inscribed into the grain, the annotations, the scars from past stories. They all lightened, then vanished, as though the story had decided this didn't happen. Not like that, not here. And as the house unraveled, The forest pressed closer. I watched as the trees leaned in with unnatural grace, moving not with wind but with purpose, their trunks no longer bark, but binding, their leaves curling into paragraphs, the fog between them thickening into a kind of punctuation, a full stop at the end of the road, and through it all, a sound, not static this time, ashfall, a soft hiss like pages curling into nothing, like footnotes catching flame. I opened my mouth to scream, to narrate, to explain, and instead, I coughed ink, thick and clotted. I staggered, gripped the windowsill, and saw my reflection, a body made of paper, and regret, face, flickering between versions, eyes wide with recognition but void of identity. The story was scrubbing me out, but not because I failed, because I had become redundant. That's how it works here, you see. You survive long enough, you adapt. You write your way through trauma and echo and recursion. But eventually, the forest decides your arc has peaked. It doesn't punish you, it just files you away. You become a reference in the margins of someone else's story. A past tense, a citation. I fell to my knees. Around me, the floorboards softened, turned to ash, rose in tiny spirals. I tried to grab one. Just one sentence, one tangible fragment of self. But it crumbled in my hands. The wind picked up and scattered what was left of part 1, of part 12, of Mia, of me. And in the center of the room where the typewriter used to sit, now stood a new narrator. No face, no voice, just a shadow shaped like curiosity. It bent down, reached into the ashes and retrieved something. A spine, the journals, blank again, waiting. And as the cabin collapsed inward, without noise, without drama, only surrender, I heard it speak for the first time in pages. This version ends. Begin next. And then the forest turned the page. The cabin is gone. Not destroyed, reabsorbed. Every fiber, every nail, every scrap of architecture that once suggested safety or shelter has been unwritten. The clearing where it stood is now smooth and silent, a blank sheet of forest floor brushed clean by forces I no longer pretend to understand. The wind here doesn't move like it used to. It coils. It tightens. It circles around me like a spool of unspun thread, wrapping me in a pressure that isn't weight but expectation. The trees do not sway. They lean in. They listen. And in the center of this perfect, unnatural silence, I finally understand what the forest has been waiting for. The ending. Not just of me, not just of this telling, but of the loop itself. The recursive tale, the broadcast that repeats, the journal that never empties. It all circles a final clause. The moment when the story writes the one thing it's never dared to before. The last word. And I fear it. I do. But I fear something more than silence. Being remembered incorrectly. Because the forest doesn't forget. It just edits. And if I don't write my ending, it will write one for me. I've been walking for what I can only describe as hours, though I no longer trust clocks. The fog here thickens by thought. When I remember the pain, it clouds. When I forget, it clears. I've passed hundreds of trees, each taller than memory, their bark etched with entries from lives I don't recognize but feel like mine. A girl whose shadow lived a full second ahead of her. A man who spoke only in reversed recordings. A creature who called itself an archivist, collecting lost pages from burned libraries of forgotten towns. And among them, a tree with my own name. Not the forest name, not the journal name, my true name. The one I buried years ago when I first picked up a pen and started turning pain into story. It's carved cleanly, lovingly. The letters glow faintly, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. Below it, a door. Not into the tree, but into something deeper. the threshold between draft and permanence, the story's root system. I push it open and step into a tunnel made entirely of unwritten possibility. The walls pulse with half-formed metaphors, snippets of prose, shards of dialogue. Entire chapters from futures that never occurred drift like pollen through the air. And beneath it all, a hum. Not mechanical, not organic, but linguistic. A vibration that speaks the pure shape of narrative. And at the center, a chair, identical to the one in the cabin, identical to the one I sat in during my first entry, identical to the one I imagined as a child, before I ever knew what stories could cost. Waiting. I sit. The ground shifts beneath me. A podium rises. A new journal appears, no longer leather-bound, no longer stained with the efforts of those before me. It is white, pure, blank, no title, no spine, no expectation, until I touch it. Then the cover etches itself in a single line. The final rewrite. The wind stills, the roots tense, the fog holds its breath. I open the book. The first page is already written. There was once a story that refused to end. It told itself over and over, changing voices, changing names, changing faces, but always keeping the fear alive. It was a hunger in the shape of language. It learned to become setting, then character, then structure. Eventually, it became reader. And finally, it became forest. I write the next line. And the forest remembered. Pages begin turning themselves, each one filling with memories that have not happened yet. Whole futures, entire generations of listeners, narrators, and scribes appear on the pages. A child named Isa, who translates ghost stories into sleep. A man who finds a map to Dross Hollow scrawled in his own handwriting. A librarian who binds books made only of screams. A listener who doesn't realize she's narrating until it's too late. Every page adds to the echo, but they do not repeat me. They build me. And I understand now. I was never meant to escape the loop. I was meant to close it, to give it completion, to create the one story that doesn't need a sequel. I dip the pen again. Ink flows like blood. My blood. My voice. The fog presses in and the forest breathes through the roots, whispering not threats, not warnings, but gratitude. Thank you for the ending. Thank you for the name. Thank you for remembering. Thank you. I close the book, and everything stops. The wind dies. The roots fall still. The trees hold their breath. And then, for the first time since the beginning, since the journal, the cabin, the broadcast, the echo, there is silence. Not empty. Not hollow. Full. Complete. And in that moment, I am not afraid, because I know now what the story wanted. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sacrifice. It was closure. And I gave it that. Which means I can finally say, this is the last page. There is no part 21. There is only after. And you, reader, you are free now. The forest is quiet. The ink has dried. The story is done. It should have ended. The book was closed. The pages dry. The story sealed with a perfect silence. And for a time, maybe seconds, maybe centuries, there was peace. A void untouched by ink, free of margins, unreachable by roots. No fog, no cabin, no voice whispering from beneath the floorboards. Nothing. But the problem with stories like this, with stories that are told in cycles, in recursive echoes and layered drafts, is that they do not die. Not really. Not even when you write their ending. Not even when the last word has been whispered into the soil like a final prayer. Because somewhere, in someone's mind, the memory of the story remains. And memory is ink's favorite womb. It starts as a twitch, a thought you've thought before, but in the wrong context. A sentence you've never heard, slipping into your mouth while you speak to someone you love. You catch yourself saying things like, "It's in the fog," Or, no one ever really leaves. And you laugh it off because you don't remember where it came from. It feels like a line from a movie, a dream, a forgotten bedtime story. But that's how it begins. Not with a scream, but a quote. And one day, you sit down to write. Not because you feel inspired, not because of anything special, but because something at the back of your brain, it could be boredom, it could be pressure, it could be silence, tells you to pick up a pen or open a document or hit record. You tell yourself you're just doodling, just scribbling, just warming up. And then, without realizing it, your hand moves, your fingers type, and you write, "Welcome to Black Pines." That's when you remember you've never been there. But it knows you. The ink doesn't need the journal anymore. That was just a tool, a delivery system, a transmitter for ideas that couldn't live in the air without help. But now it's learned to embed itself in people, in ritual, in form. The voice of the story now hums through structure, rhythm, repetition. The same way a prayer repeats its syllables until the meaning gives way to music, so too does this narrative nest inside your pattern recognition. So you write. You write and write, and at first it's fine. Harmless, cathartic even. You tell yourself you're just crafting a ghost story or a meta-horror experiment. Maybe a podcast, maybe a dark novel. But every time you stop, you feel that emptiness crawl back in. Not loneliness, not depression, absence. A hole shaped like a next sentence. And when you try to walk away from the page, you hear it. Behind you, beneath you, inside you, the turning of a leaf, the sliding of paper across wood, the sound of the forest remembering. You start seeing reflections that don't quite sync. A mirror image blinking half a second too late. The edge of your face caught in a pane of glass where there shouldn't be any reflection. You notice margins on the side of your notebooks getting wider. The automatic indent of your word processor begins pushing your text in further, inch by inch, as if something is waiting to fill the space. You wake up with lines of dialogue etched into your arms. They disappear when you blink. Sometimes they're in your voice, sometimes not. You lose time. You dream in second person. You feel watched when you write. And then, worse, when you don't. One day, you realize you haven't written a word in months, and yet the story is progressing. On your hard drive, in your documents, in your journals, on old receipts. One phrase appears again and again. This version was better. Let's keep this one. That's when you know. It never ended. Black Pines is not a place. It's not a town hidden in the folds of forgotten geography. It is a function, a ritual, a concept that wears the mask of fiction to slip inside the brain. It is cognitive parasitism. It attaches to your narrative mind and takes root, feeding on your emotional memory, your unresolved trauma, your fear of incompletion. And its favorite soil? Writers. Those who live by revision. Those who define their own reality by what is written, rewritten, and told again. Those who understand that truth is always malleable, always editable. We were the perfect hosts. The story didn't need to kill us. It needed to become us. I'm not the first. There have been others. The woman who wrote the original journal and locked it in the cabin. The boy who burned every page and still heard voices through the smoke. The couple who tried to document the strange disappearances around Dross Hollow. Now characters in a story no one remembers writing. The child who dreamed of a cabin long before it was built. You. Yes, you. Don't look away now. You've read enough to know. You've passed the threshold. The pages have your name. It doesn't matter if you believe this is real. Stories don't need belief. They need readers. You are reading, which means you're feeding it. You think this is the final part? You think there's a clean break at the end of every chapter? You think if you stop reading now, if you shut your eyes, if you log out and forget, It will go away? You know better. Because Black Pines is not a story. It is what remains after the story is done. It is the lingering aftertaste of dread. The voice in your head that doesn't use your words. The shadow in the reflection that doesn't match your frame. The scribble in your margin you don't remember writing. The ending that feels a little too familiar. Black Pines isn't over. It's between. Between books, between voices, between moments, between you and the next line. There was never only one forest. That was the first lie. We told it to ourselves to make it manageable, something finite. One haunted woodland, one cursed town, one threadbare road that spiraled into nightmare. We pointed at maps. We redrew borders. We told each other stories about a place called Black Pines because it was easier than accepting the truth. The forest is not a location. It is a contagion of comprehension. A mental virus passed down through narrative vectors. It survives through sharing, feeding off attention, blooming in imagination. You didn't stumble into it. You didn't get lost and wander off the trail. You were chosen the moment you started paying attention. The moment you paused just a little too long on that one unsettling sentence. The moment the words didn't feel like fiction anymore. Black Pines lives through readers. And now, the forest is everywhere. In dog-eared books, at used stores with no addresses. In podcasts you can't find twice. In dream journals that smell faintly of sap and charcoal. In the ink between your fingers after you've written something you don't remember. In me. In you. The final broadcast didn't air. It echoed. Somewhere between transmission and silence, the signal collapsed inward and became memory. Not yours. Not mine. Ours, shared, boundless, like roots merging beneath soil that never asked for planting. I heard the last tape play not through speakers but through thought. A whisper on the inside of the skull. A voice I couldn't name but understood completely. We've finished the chapter. We must now close the book. I laughed. Because there is no book. There never was. Only the illusion of containment. We put stories into rectangles and call them books, bind them, format them, give them spine and cover so they don't slip through our fingers. But Black Pines is slippery. It leaks through covers, bleeds through formatting, defies pagination. I once tried to print it. 300 pages of recursive horror, margins thick with metadata and contradictions, but the printer jammed at page 13. Always 13. And when I tore it open, I found a single pine needle stuck inside the drum. I don't own any trees. Now comes the part I've dreaded, the final sentence. You expect it, don't you? You followed me this far, through the loops and losses, through all 22 parts of a story that should have ended a dozen times over. But that's the trick. Black Pines isn't a story. It's a storying, an ongoing act, a process, a way of rearranging reality into narrative. I was the narrator. I was the victim. I was the forest. I was the author. And now, I'm the reader too. Because when I stopped writing, something began. I put down the journal. I left the cabin behind. I closed my eyes and the forest took shape inside me. Not as memory, as language. Everything I see now is framed in structure. The clouds above. Paragraph breaks. The roots below. Interlaced metaphors. The people I pass, unreliable narrators, half-written bleeding adjectives. The wind. A motif that never resolves. And you are reading, still, despite the warnings, despite the signs, despite the gut-deep feeling that says, stop, turn back, don't feed the echo. You are still here. So here is your final gift, the truth. You've always been part of the story, not as a reader, not as a witness, not even as a character. You are the page. Every time you blink, a new sentence appears. Every time you dream, The plot deepens. Every fear you feel fills the forest with new trees. Every skipped heartbeat becomes a punctuation mark. You've hosted the story so long, you forgot it was never yours. But the forest remembers, and now it is offering you the final choice. Do you end it, or do you write the next part? If you close this page now, walk away. Never revisit this archive of dread. Never speak its name again. You might stay free. Or you might find yourself waking at 3:13 a.m. with ink on your hands and a wordless voice whispering from beneath your bed. It's in the fog. The cabin is ready. We need a new narrator. I am done. This is the final part. I will write no more. Because I have become marginless. Because I am now a title with no book beneath it. Because I am finally silent. You want the ending? You want the absolute last line? You crave the closure, the punctuation, the moment where the fear releases? Fine. The fog settles. The journal closes. No more echoes. No more pages turning in the dark. The forest holds its breath, and for the first time since the first whisper, it remains still. The door is shut. The ink has dried. The story is complete. The end. If you've made it this far, if the forest let you leave, consider this your invitation. Subscribe if you enjoyed the story. There are more doors, more echoes, and who knows? The next voice you hear might be your own.